What would you do if you saw someone stripped of dignity? Yet the one pointing fingers was hiding a darker truth. In the quiet suburban sprawl of Willow Creek, where manicured lawns and polished mailboxes screamed order, a storm was brewing, one that would unravel the facade of a woman named Karen Whitmore and expose the raw, jagged edges of human cruelty. Karen was the kind of person who thrived on control. Her pristine white colonial house, with its perfectly trimmed hedges, was a monument to her carefully curated life. She was the president of the neighborhood association, a title she wielded like a scepter, ensuring every blade of grass conformed to her standards. But there was one blemish on her perfect canvas: a homeless man named Eli, who had taken to sitting on a bench near the community park. His tattered coat and weathered face were an affront to Karen's vision of Willow Creek. To her, Eli wasn't a person but a stain, a disruption to the harmony she demanded. Every morning, Karen would drive by the park in her sleek SUV, her lips pursed as she glared at Eli. He'd sit quietly, clutching a small cardboard sign that read, "Anything helps." She'd mutter under her breath, "Why doesn't he just leave?" Her disdain grew like a weed, choking out any flicker of empathy. She wasn't alone in her complaints. Other neighbors whispered about Eli, but Karen was the loudest, the most relentless. She'd post on the neighborhood app, rallying others to her cause. "We can't let vagrants ruin our community." Her words were sharp, cutting, and they spread like wildfire. One crisp October morning, Karen decided enough was enough. She dialed 911, her voice trembling with rehearsed outrage. "There's a homeless man loitering in the park," she said, her tone dripping with indignation. "He's scaring people. You need to remove him." The dispatcher promised to send officers, and Karen hung up, satisfied. She imagined Eli being carted away, her neighborhood restored to its flawless state. But the universe had other plans. Officers Ramirez and Chun arrived at the park within the hour. Eli was still there, sitting on the bench, his hands folded over his sign. He looked up as the officers approached, his eyes tired but kind, carrying the weight of 1,000 untold stories. Karen watched from her porch, arms crossed, expecting a swift resolution. But something was off. The officers weren't cuffing Eli or ushering him into their cruiser. Instead, they were talking to him, their faces serious, their heads tilted as if listening intently. Unbeknownst to Karen, the officers had received an anonymous tip just before arriving. A neighbor, a quiet woman named Lila who rarely spoke at association meetings, had called the station. Lila lived across from the park and had seen something the previous night that made her stomach churn. She'd watched from her window as Karen, cloaked in the darkness of midnight, crept toward Eli's bench. In her hands was a garbage bag, heavy with rotting food scraps and coffee grounds. Lila saw Karen dump the contents over Eli as he slept, the trash spilling across his body like a cruel baptism. Lila hadn't confronted Karen. She was too timid for that, but her conscience wouldn't let her stay silent. Officer Ramirez crouched beside Eli, noticing the faint smell of decay clinging to his clothes. "Sir, can you tell us what happened last night?" he asked gently. Eli hesitated, his voice low and rough. "Someone threw trash on me," he said. "Didn't see who. I just woke up covered in it." His words were matter-of-fact, but the pain in his eyes was unmistakable. Officer Chun scribbled in her notebook, her jaw tight. She glanced at Ramirez, and they shared a look that said they both knew there was more to this story. Across the street, Karen's confidence began to waver. Why were the officers lingering? Why were they talking to him? She marched over, her heels clicking against the pavement, her voice sharp as she interrupted. "Officers, this man is a nuisance. He's been here for weeks, bothering everyone. You need to do your job and get him out of here." Her face was flushed, her hands gesturing wildly, but the officers didn't budge. "Ma'am," Officer Ramirez said, standing to face her, "we're investigating a report of vandalism. Someone dumped trash on this man last night. Do you know anything about that?" Karen's mouth opened, then closed. Her eyes darted to Eli, then back to the officers. "That's ridiculous," she snapped. Why would anyone do that? He probably did it himself to get attention. Her voice was shrill now, the cracks in her composure widening. But Lila, watching from her window, had had enough. She stepped onto her porch, her hands trembling but her resolve firm. "I saw it," she called out, her voice cutting through the morning air. All heads turned toward her. Karen's face drained of color. "I saw you, Karen," Lila continued, her words steady despite the fear in her chest. "Last night you dumped that trash on him. I saw it from my window." The air seemed to freeze. Karen's eyes widened, her mouth working to form a denial, but nothing came out. Officer Chun stepped forward, her tone calm but unyielding. "Ms. Whitmore, we're going to need you to come with us to answer some questions." Karen's hands flew to her chest, her voice rising to a near scream. "This is outrageous. You're believing her? She's nobody. I'm the head of the neighborhood association." But her protests fell flat. The officers' faces were stone, and Eli, still sitting on the bench, looked at her with eyes that held no anger only sorrow. As Karen was led to the cruiser, the neighbors began to gather. Whispers spread, phones were pulled out, and soon the neighborhood app was alight with the story. Karen Whitmore, the self-appointed guardian of Willow Creek's perfection, had been exposed. But the twist didn't end there. Lila, emboldened by her courage, approached Eli after the officers left. She sat beside him, something no one else had done. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I should have spoken up sooner." Eli smiled, a small, weary thing. "You spoke up when it mattered," he said. Lila learned Eli's story that day. He wasn't just a vagrant. He was a veteran, a man who'd lost everything: his job, his home, his family after a string of medical bills and bad luck. He didn't beg for pity. He just wanted to survive. Lila, who had always felt invisible in Willow Creek, found purpose in that moment. She began bringing Eli food, blankets, and eventually rallied the neighborhood to help him find shelter. Her quiet act of kindness rippled, softening the hearts of those who'd once turned away. Karen, meanwhile, faced consequences she couldn't charm her way out of. The police charged her with harassment and vandalism, and the neighborhood association voted her out. Her perfect life unraveled as her neighbors shunned her, their whispers now directed at her. She'd wanted control, but all she'd earned was shame. She moved away within months. Her house sold to a young family who didn't care about perfection but about community. Eli eventually found a small apartment through a local charity Lila connected him with. He never forgot her kindness, and she never forgot the lesson of that October morning. That courage could bloom in the quietest hearts, and cruelty could hide behind the shiniest facades. But for Karen, the bitterest pill was knowing her actions hadn't just hurt Elithide, it exposed her to the world. Her legacy wasn't one of power but of pettiness, a stain far worse than the one she tried to erase. ND